Hello, I'm Daniel Weiss, your host, and you are listening to my podcast where my guests and I focus on topics of nutrition, active lifestyle for health and performance. No fat, guaranteed. If you are new to this podcast, I hope you will enjoy it, and if you are a returning listener, visitor, please make sure to rate the podcast on Stitcher or iTunes, as it will help me to grow our community and get interesting guests and introduce interesting topics in future episodes. You are also welcome to join my Facebook group, which is linked in the show notes. So hello and welcome. In today's episode we have an amazing guest, like always, and today is Georgie Fear, who is a registered dietitian and sports dietitian, and she's been in the field of nutrition for over 15 years. Of course, you can make that she is passionate about the nutrition and, as she said it in her own words, helping people reach their goals and eat happily ever after. I really love that.
Thanks.
And you also wrote something like, yes, I run a nutrition coaching program, but my goal isn't just for you to get lean. So that's the plan. It's for you to get and stay lean sustainably without exerting much effort. To do it with love and joy and smile on your face. That's really, I really love that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think happiness and sustainability are some of the things that often get forgotten when people are thinking about changing their diet or working with a professional. Sometimes people, it's like going to the dentist. They know they want the help or they need the help, but they kind of dread what's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely, and I find that it's the biggest obstacle for people. They think that it is to get lean or to lose weight, but actually, like you mentioned, it's the sustainability part, like staying lean. And this is obviously part of your expertise, part of what you do, and you are focusing on the behavioral change and on your habits. So basically, as I found out, you had this book, which is like the Lean Habits. I actually downloaded it right today, so I'm really looking forward to going through it. And you also co-authored the Endurance Diet book and Racing Weight cookbook, which I believe is with Matt Fitzgerald, who was, I don't know if you know it, but he was a guest in one of my previous interviews.
Oh, I didn't know that. Matt is fantastic. He's a wonderful expert. I did not actually co-author the Endurance Diet with him. That is his sole book, so I have no claims to that. I just provided recipes for him to include in the book. Because one thing to know about Matt: fantastic coach, fantastic runner, fantastic writer, not into cooking.
So you filled that part for him.
Yep.
So perfect. Yeah, so can you introduce yourself? Maybe you want to add something to your introduction, how you actually got into this, all the world of nutrition coaching and dietetics.
Sure. So I was fascinated in nutrition from the time I was quite young, actually. I got into the field through kind of a negative direction because I developed an eating disorder at a young age, and I was feeling depressed and just, I don't know, super unhappy with myself and my life as a young teenager, maybe 13 or 14. And like a lot of kids, I decided to try and get skinnier because I think that will help. And at the same time, I also had always been into sports. And so that actually ended up being a really favorable misfortune, if that's possible, because I saw right away how my sports performance declined when I was trying so hard to lose weight and be as skinny as possible. And it also landed me in the office of a dietitian, and I worked with a dietitian on my own improvement and getting healthier and getting stronger, and ended up, becoming a lot more successful in my athletic career as a result. So by the time I went to college, I had already worked with a dietitian for 4 years. So I knew more about nutrition than most people did at that point. So getting a degree in nutrition was actually really straightforward and quite easy. I love science. I love biology. And once I became a registered dietitian, I continued to learn quite a bit about psychology because I find it fascinating why people eat what they eat, not just the numbers and performance times, but also, what makes somebody eat too much or what makes somebody eat too little or make somebody choose this food over that food. And
Hmm.
it's really complicated to help people improve their diets. You can't just tell people what to eat and then send them off and expect them to do it. Um, so yeah, I'm really just fascinated in people. I love talking about food. I love cooking and eating. I love seeing the people that I work with reach reach their goals. Whether that's performance or for many people, it's just getting fitter and healthier and losing weight. Um, I think it's a lot of fun to do what I
Yeah,
do.
yeah, that's amazing, and I completely agree with you because I feel like I'm on the same path. And anyway, this is like uh, the same topic or same story with most of the guests on my podcast, is that they somehow turn their passion into their job,
Yeah,
let's say, or yeah, and it turns out to be like nutrition and sports and so on. And just like you mentioned, like when we are young, and especially this is like a common theme among athletes, right? We want to manage our weight, we want to uh, get leaner, stronger, and do more. Sometimes that's not the answer. Sometimes we need to step back. So, can you maybe speak a little more about like your unfortunate fortune, like how you had like the problems with your in your teenage years and how it turned out?
sure. So as a young kid, I was always playing sports. I went to summer camp and, loved gym class. Gym class was like my favorite thing, even when I was a little kid. I liked climbing the ropes. I liked doing gymnastics. I played soccer. I played softball. I just did so many different sports. When I was about 13 or 14 was when I started to feel like maybe I wasn't good enough in a entire sense. Like not just not good enough at sports,
Hmm.
but like I wasn't pretty enough, I wasn't likable enough, and I had moved from the town where I grew up to a new town, and I felt like all of a sudden maybe there were social circles and there were kids that were cool and kids that weren't cool, and that had never really occurred to me before,
Uh-huh.
which I think is kind of common around 13, 14 years old, is when you're first realizing that there's a strata and some people are higher up and some people are lower down, and
Yeah.
I just wanted to be likable. And so I don't know where I first got the idea that eating less or losing weight would be the ticket to being one of the cool kids, but it was definitely the case that all of the cool kids and the pretty girls were very thin. And I somehow got the message from society, it's not hard to get, that being thin is, comes from eating less. So I
Yeah.
tried eating less, but not really knowing too much about nutrition, I didn't really have a good idea of the the quality mattered. I thought, well, if you just like eat less and eat less and eat smaller meals and no desserts, that will help. So I was playing sports at school at the time, and my freshman year in high school, I wanted to run cross country because that was like a new sport that
Mhm.
wasn't offered before, and I thought runners were super cool and super thin and super fast, and I was always super strong. I was built like a little fire hydrant. So of course I wanted to be the opposite. Um, and I was too slow. I was just frankly just not given the gift of speed. I was and I felt like if I was thinner, I could have run faster. I could have kept up with all of these girls that were really fast. And I just got this idea that being fat was why I was slow, and not that it was just more innately my talent to do things like throw the shot put or throw the discus.
Yeah.
So I really just doubled down and said, I'm going to eat as little as possible because then I'll be fast and then I'll be a good athlete. And I probably lost 20 or 30 pounds in about 6 months. And
Wow.
yeah, I just worked very, very hard. I really wanted to be faster.
Yeah,
And
20, 30 pounds. And what weight were you before?
I went from about 140 pounds to
Uh-huh.
somewhere between 110 and 120.
Yeah, so
Um,
quite a big change.
yeah, quite a big change because I was, perfectly healthy at 140. It just
Hmm.
and so contrary to what I wanted, I did not become a super athlete. my I just felt tired all the time. My hair started falling out. Um,
Uh-huh.
and I was just quite sick. I ended up getting mononucleosis quite terribly. I ended up very, very anemic. And when I went to the doctor, because I had this swelling on my neck because of the mono, they told my mom how anemic I was and that they needed to get me on iron supplements and better nutrition. And um, things really started to turn around once I started to learn a little bit about how it wasn't as simple as eat less, be thinner, and you're faster. Um, it turned out that when I was eating less and I was just too tired to exercise and too tired to strength train, I was never going to be a good athlete. And so,
Hmm.
working with a dietitian, she was able to show me how much calories my body needed and reassure me that eating adequately was not going to make me fat. It was actually going to give me energy and nutrients to perform well. So I gradually started to, eat more and
Uh-huh.
recognize that I was indeed much stronger and more capable at my natural weight, which was between 130, 140 pounds. And I didn't, I think there was this fear that everybody was just trying to make me fat, uh, which doesn't make sense because what on earth would benefit them if they were to turn me into like a little fat kid? But no,
Like there was a conspiracy.
right, yes, like make Georgie fat. We're all against her. Conspiracy is the best word. So no, I ended up actually, between the ages of 14 and 18, finding like a stable nutrition intake and staying around 135 pounds, and I ended up being state champion in throwing the discus. My natural inclination was I'm just a strength athlete. I'm not meant to be a cross country runner. So there's something to be said in there for just feeding your body and allowing it to do what it's good at rather than trying to there's people out there that are naturally wonderful speed athletes. There's people out there that are light and artistic ballerinas. I'm just not one of them. So um, something to be said for just being who you are, and when you're well fed you can best discover who that is. So that was my story. I did actually have a couple interesting encore chapters because when I went to college I did take up distance running, and I discovered that I simply needed to run distances that were much longer than 5 kilometers to be competitive. So
Uh-huh.
I took up running the marathon. I ran a 50K and actually won the open division, which is probably the only race I've
Nice.
ever won. The only race I've ever won in my entire life. Um, and just since then, I haven't really been competitive in terms of like team sports, but I've done lots of marathons, triathlons, got into hiking non-competitively. I've enjoyed a fair amount of outdoor rock climbing. Um, and so, yeah, I love sport and I love teaching people to enjoy whatever sport they want to engage in. So I'm also really looking forward to trying cross-country skiing this winter. I've never done it before, but I just recently moved to the mountains, Canmore, Alberta, and there's a beautiful Nordic center here with just tons and tons of Nordic skiing trails, and I'm excited to have somebody teach me a new sport. I figure I'm not too old at 36 to try a new sport.
Wow, that's actually what I'm planning on to do as well this winter if there is enough snow. Cross country skiing to try it to supplement my running.
Oh,
Yeah,
really? So you're gonna start it this winter?
exactly. Like everybody will like been telling me about it, like how amazing it is and so on. And I was like, well, I, I do what's comfortable for me. Like that's running. That's something that I'm familiar with. So no matter what season it is, I will go for a run instead of bicycle, swimming, or whatever else. I will just run, 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 run.
I love running. I can
Yeah,
relate. I can relate. There's something beautifully simplistic about not needing equipment or poles or skis. Just put your shoes on and go.
exactly.
Uh, Unfortunately, my back yeah, my back started to give me
Uh-huh.
problems with the impact. So that's why I tend to hike now, because the pounding from running is making my back unhappy. So I'm also very excited for cross country skiing because I can get my heart rate up nice and
Mm-hmm.
high.
Yeah,
Hopefully, I'm sure my heart rate will be plenty high
I'm sure.
without necessarily having any impact. So I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, let me
Maybe I'll be
let me
terrible at it.
know.
I don't know, but I'm gonna have a good
I
time.
mean, there are many great athletes, like especially endurance athletes, who have background in cross country skiing.
Yeah, that's actually how I've kind of taken up my interest in it, was because I've worked with some athletes in cross country skiing as well as the biathlon, and they got me interested in it. It's pretty fascinating sport, even just to watch. Like, I watch the biathlon
Uh-huh.
race clips on the internet, and I'm like, man, that is one exciting sport. I can't believe it's not like the biggest sport in the world that everybody watches biathlon, because it's just so exciting to watch.
Yeah, actually, this is I can relate. This is one of like two sports that I can watch. Like I really hate or find it boring to watch sports on the TV, but yeah, I can survive watching biathlon.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so let's get back to the topics, and actually, it's very interesting because I believe that you focus, as you already mentioned, like mm, when it comes to dietetics and helping people to really make the change from the inside, and that's focusing on their psychology and habit forming.
Right. Yeah. It's, I think, like a lot of dietitians or other nutrition professionals, we start out thinking that there's, one way that we'll do this, and it'll be teaching people about what they need and the amounts that they need. And then I think as people get further and further into years of their career, they start to recognize that that's not the biggest part of your game. The most important skill that you can have is helping people discover why they want to do something, and then looking at all the things that get in the
Mhm.
way, because there's just so many barriers to eating well that we encounter on a daily basis, whether it's, the kids' candy that we don't want to deny them, but then we find that it tempts us, or for many people, there's stress and fatigue that have led them to eating extra. So everybody has really unique barriers, and so it's not enough just to tell people what the ideal is and expect them to do it. We have to really walk beside them and help them look at the things that pop up that get in their way and help them get around those
Mhm.
things. It's an obstacle course, pretty much.
Yeah, just like you mentioned, like people often are in stressful environment. They have these kind of things that are outside of their control, and then yeah, I believe if you want to control your food intake or nutrition, it's not always the best way, because if you are stressed, you are simply losing willpower to do that, and then you just
Right.
fall into your bad habits or fail with your habits that you are just forming right now. And I believe that this is also what you this is also what you mentioned in your book, like the lean habits. And
Yeah.
yes.
Everybody has different habits, right, that they need. And when I work with clients one on one,
Mhm.
obviously we can personalize everything. The book was really an exercise in taking the 16 things that are most important, that pretty much everybody needs, or that most people need, and just laying it out. It's kind of like a training program where people might say, I have a 16-week program here of things to do to run a marathon. This is like 16 specific habits to work on to
Uh-huh.
hopefully come out the other side with a lifetime of just healthy behavior patterns.
And does a person need to work on all of the 16, or is it like that there are 16 different, let's say, approaches, or how is it?
I think of them as they're separate
Mhm.
skills. So if you already have a certain skill, you may not need to work on it again. But it's very tricky because our nutrition can be very deceptive, where we can think we're really good at something, But then when you actually take a pen and you start checking how many vegetables you eat a day, you might discover you're not as good at it as you thought.
Right.
So I usually say, if you figure 2 weeks to work on each habit, if you read the first few pages on something and you think like, oh, I'm a pro at this, I'm so good at this, I don't need to work on it, I would still give it a week just to make sure you're as awesome as you think you are at it. Does
Yeah.
that make
Yes,
sense?
like for me definitely, because I know that we are very bad at evaluating ourselves. So
Yeah, it's
yeah, and
true.
especially also we have like studies, and we have seen that when people are just reporting in the studies, like self-reporting data, like how much they eat, and they make these, yeah,
It's terrible.
yeah. When
It's
you
terrible.
compare
And
it
they're
to
all
the real world,
terrible
like
at
how
estimating how
when
much
you
you eat.
yes, write all these things down, then they are like surprised how much they eat, and often undereat, often overeat, and yeah, it's all over the place, but it's far from
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah. It's very, very true. Yeah, underreporting is considerable. Um, Even dietitians, we are trained to be able to estimate the calorie and nutrient values of food with relative
Yeah.
accuracy. Even dietitians are bad at assessing our own
Hmm.
intake when it comes to estimating how many calories we've eaten. And the people that are statistically the most underreporting are people that have higher body weights. So the people that are the most likely to need help in this area are the people that would have the toughest time doing it themselves. So that's why I think it's handy to suspend your own belief in your expertise and actually just approach everything like maybe you have room to improve. Maybe I have room to learn more. Maybe I have room to learn more. So most people, I think they do need to practice and work on all 16
Hmm.
things that are in the book. The 4 in the beginning, you may see on the cover that it talks about like 4 core behaviors. And so that's really important. And I think what makes the work that I do different than the approaches that you'll find, all over the internet and in a lot of popular diet books is I think many popular weight loss schemes, they focus on details and they miss some really big important issues. So some of the big things include being hungry before you eat and stopping when you're satisfied. It's like the most basic thing in the world that every infant in the
Yeah.
world knows how to do. They cry when they want to be fed. When they've had enough, they stop. Um, but somewhere between infancy and adulthood, many of us are eating for all sorts of other reasons, like, oh, I thought I need to get my protein in, or I better eat now because I'm going into a
Yeah.
meeting and I don't want to fall asleep in the meeting and it'll keep me awake. Or I have to eat popcorn while I study because I need the carbohydrates for my brain. We come up with all of these reasons to eat, even if we aren't hungry. And we've accommodated a lifetime of conditioned responses. So many times people feel upset and then they eat and they recognize that the act of eating lessens the intensity of the sadness. And so they learn that. And then when they're sad in the future, they start to learn that it's a way to soothe themselves. And so that can create a cycle of negative emotions leading to food intake, which can lead to excess weight. So I try and help people straighten all of that
Hmm.
out. And so we start at the very beginning of the book by talking about how frequently to eat. And there's a fair bit of biology in the first section, and I invite the reader to skip it if they don't want to know the biology. That's totally okay. But our bodies are designed to maintain a healthy body weight if we eat meals of a certain size with a certain space between them. We're not meant to be grazing all day
Right.
long. It tends to produce a high calorie intake and a high body weight if people just graze all the
Hmm.
time. We're also not meant to eat one meal a day. And when people tend to restrict themselves and then eat all of their calories in one sitting, we see a lot of negative effects come from that, either psychologically or physically. So I know there's people out there that like intermittent fasting. It's
Yeah.
just not my thing. I don't see it as the only way. So it's not a method that I recommend. I recommend kind of doing what works best with the way our brain works. So for most people, it turns out that if you eat when you're hungry and you stop when you're
Mhm.
satisfied and you're eating whole foods, 3 or 4 meals a day is a pretty optimal breakdown that enables people to eat enough so that they feel psychologically and physically very full and satisfied. But then you get enough of a gap in between meals, 4 to 6 hours or so, to have your appetite come back and feel that genuine need to eat again. And then you go through the cycle of eating until you're satisfied
Exactly.
again. So for a lot of, yeah, so it sounds like you've tried something like that before in terms of your own eating.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been a journey for me. I don't feel like I'm completely there because uh, I started or before, or my journey started by, I would say, with intermittent fasting actually, and I was a big proponent
Mm-hmm.
of this. I did it for like 2 years, 3 years, and then as I started being more active, I found out that, well, this is not the right approach for myself, because as I'm increasing my activity, I'm not getting enough calories with intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
And I know that some people can make it. They eat like very calorie dense foods, but with the whole foods, it's a particular challenge because you have these foods are typically also very satiating, so it's hard to get in.
I'm so
Yeah,
glad you said that. I don't see people intermittent fasting that are eating lots of fruits and vegetables. Your stomach, like just the volume
yeah, you
capacity is just
cannot
not
handle
meant
it.
to work in that way. Like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
eat big
yeah, it's really
meals,
difficult to eat
but
a.
I mean, if I want to eat like, I would need to drink oil.
Yeah, right. I hear you. You just can't get the maximum benefit of whole grains and lots of fruits and vegetables. And I am not coming up with anything new here by telling people that eating lots of fruits and
Mhm.
vegetables is good
Yeah,
for them. I mean, that's decades upon decades of research showing that like it's helpful in preventing cancer and heart disease and all sorts of things.
but
So
it's not
it's very
fancy. It's not
difficult to
fancy
say.
to eat, let's say, normally or whatever. It's not trendy.
This is true. But I what I'm discovering is that there's enough people out there that really like freedom. It doesn't have to be so new and trendy. People really kind of like the idea of being able to eat an entire plate of food instead
Hmm.
of like a really small amount of food. But yeah, I get what you're saying. How sometimes people want there to be some fancy trick, something that's new and shiny and sounds high tech, and I'm like ancient biology. It works really well.
Yeah, definitely. So
So
basically, what you have been saying up until now, it sounds to me like what I'm researching right now. This is more like going into intuitive eating, eating when you are hungry, and like we started mentioning or speaking about right now, is that even when you are eating intuitively, it's not purely about eating whatever you want. It's like you should always focus on having like these foods that are unprocessed, focus on the fruits, vegetables, whole foods, and this actually also helps with, let's say, resetting your hunger cues for eating or getting hungry or feeling satiated.
yeah, yeah, I think that's a really good way to summarize it. And intuitive eating, for anybody that's not familiar with it, it's based on eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're satisfied, and really learning more about what those two states entail. Because we know hunger is not a simple concept. The desire for food can come from a genuine physical need, or it can come from an emotional one, or a desire for food. We all know that we can desire
Hmm.
food when we're not hungry. We can be satisfied and leave broccoli on our plate, but then the dessert menu comes around and it's like, oh ho ho, maybe I do have room for dessert. And so it's very complicated, the factors about choosing when to eat and when to pass on food, as well as satiety. And as you said, whole foods play a big role in that. A lot of times people simplify intuitive eating into eat what I want whenever I want, And so it's kind of like the opposite of dieting.
Yeah.
And when people take that approach to intuitive eating, research shows that it's helpful in terms of decreasing the symptoms of disordered eating. It can decrease people's frequency of binge eating or losing control and eating very large amounts of food. Simply just deciding that you want nothing to do with dieting, that you're not going to limit yourself, is very helpful in that way. But it's not effective in helping people actually lose weight if they want to attain a lean body, which probably makes sense. If you think I'm just going to eat whatever I want, whenever I want, it doesn't lead to weight loss. So what I like to do is, my approach is very scientific. I come from a scientific background.
Of course.
Is it combining...
Of course.
What'd you say? Oh, okay. Is really combining the idea of eating from your body cues more than your emotional cues, and treating your emotional cues as very valid and just calling for different approaches. So I've learned a lot from psychological research, and if people have significant challenges there, I like to work in concert with a therapist so that they can learn from a true expert in terms of handling emotions, about emotion regulation. And I also feel like nutritional science has a lot to add in terms of guiding us to what sort of foods we should be eating for maximum hunger relief and maximum appetite suppression. So I did some research when I was a graduate student about how the brain actually perceives that we're full or satiated, and it's beautiful and complicated. And I have developed a way of explaining it as there's 4 physical things that our body picks up on. We have pathways that are related to the volume of food that we've eaten. That's one of them. So the amount of food that's in your stomach sends signals to your brain that say, hey, this is good. We can dial down that hunger and turn it off. We also get signals from 3 other things: carbohydrates, fats, and protein. And so each of those has its own cascade of chemical messengers that circulate through the blood up to the brain and let it know about the nutrients that we've eaten. So once we know about that, we can decide what we want to put on our plate and choose to include all of those. It will actually give you a more accurately regulated appetite that will feel satiated when you've had the right amount of calories. So I'm not a fan of extreme things like no fat or no carbs or all protein. It's very easy to argue with science that satiety results very nicely from including all 4 things, of certain volume of food achieved through fruits and vegetables and low calorie density things, as well as including protein and carbohydrates and fats, because they all perform a unique role.
Perfect. That sounds really reliable.
It's also nice because you can eat whatever it is that you want. There's nothing that you really can't eat. So like peanut butter is my favorite food in the world. I love peanut butter. I eat peanut butter every single day.
That's like your trigger food,
and
right?
if somebody told me like, oh, you can't. Well, I don't think there's any problem with it. So I don't really call it a trigger food. I think people say like a trigger food would be a food that triggers them to do something undesirable. I just think of it as my favorite food. I enjoy it. It puts a smile on my face, and I eat it often because I enjoy it so much. So if somebody said like, oh, you can't have peanut butter because there's fat in it and you need to keep your fat intake very low, well, that would be a big disappointment for me. Or if somebody said, oh, it's not paleo, you can't eat legumes, it's not going to make me very happy. And I'm just not willing to sacrifice happiness when there's ways to eat that are so effective, that are so pleasant to enjoy and enable me to eat whatever. Like it's very difficult once you've experienced freedom from diet rules. It's pretty unappetizing to go back.
Yeah, I hear you. And I actually found out like during my journey that as I'm eating more mindfully, like being slowing down eating and so on. Before, I had this kind of relationship with food that I would, for example, with peanut butter, I would eat the whole jar, because it's there, I love it, I would eat it whole. Or if I had a pizza, I would eat it whole. Even two pizza pies. But now I can actually really, when I focus on the food, when I slow it down, I see that, okay, I eat half of the pizza, I feel okay, I can put it away.
So slowing down, and it sounds like also tuning into how you
Yes,
feel
definitely.
while you're eating it and after you're eating it. Because if we pay attention to the just cause and effect relationships as we go through the world, it's very informative. Like, I don't know anybody that eats a jar of peanut butter and does not feel at least slightly
Yeah,
unwell
exactly.
afterward.
But I think that in that case it would be also what preceded all this, because as I mentioned, I was on intermittent fasting, so I was creating that hunger, and then
Hungry, yeah.
like, if you are hungry and it's hard to slow down your eating, right? So basically you just throw it inside of you without being aware of it. And there is there's this disconnect between like when you start eating and your brain needs these signals to arrive into your brain that you are okay, you are already satisfied, you don't need to eat more.
Yeah, there's definitely a delay there. Different nutrients have different time delays, actually. So what's neat about these different pathways is that everything's neat about them. I don't know what to say. So if somebody's eating peanut butter or nuts or cheddar cheese or a food that's fairly high in fat, but it's small in volume, it's the greatest delay in satisfaction. So you have to wait a long time for those signals to really sink in, which is why I always say nuts are just not a good idea as a snack. If you're very hungry and you grab a handful of nuts, you're going to have to wait like 20, 30 minutes at least for that to be effective.
That's interesting.
Because the fat takes time. Yeah, the triglyceride molecule has to be broken down, and then that has to trigger the synthesis of other chemicals, and there's a few chain reaction steps that have to happen for compounds to circulate up to your brain regarding the consumption of high-fat foods. So it's much faster to eat something that's high in volume and begin the satisfaction cascade from the stretch receptors in your stomach. So high volume foods, the pressure on the stomach walls, it doesn't even need to have a chemical messenger accumulate in the blood because it's a direct nerve connection from the vagus nerve to the brain. So your central nervous system gets the signal that your stomach is stretched very, very fast. So that's why if you drink a bottle of bubbly water, you can feel immediately, whoa, stretch in my stomach. And it's fleeting, which is why if you drink a bottle of bubbly water, you feel full, but it's only for a very few minutes. Then you burp or it sinks in and the pressure is released. And so it's not lasting. So you can't trick yourself and lose tons of weight just drinking bubbly water all the time because your body starts to figure out that it's not being backed up by the chemical signals that say, okay, we had nutrients too. So it really is a well-designed system. And so what I teach in my book and with the habits is really just capitalizing on those pathways in your body. So let yourself feel hungry and then eating a meal that includes a fair volume of food from fruits and vegetables, as well as proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. And as you said, choosing mostly unprocessed sources. And then you don't have to really count things. You can just approximate the right ratios, and then you wait until you feel physically hungry again. And of course, there's some skills involved in the meantime. To not eat until you're hungry again is a skill set in its own, because for many people that uncovers some emotional challenges.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you are speaking about it. I'm looking forward to get to your book, and I'm already getting a lot of information from speaking with you right now. But is that...
You don't really have a podcast, do you? You just wanted to talk to me.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted like a personal coaching,
This is your way of getting a free phone call. I'm happy to do it. I love talking with people. I can't stop.
Yeah, so
it's wonderful.
So that's one thing, but
So I guess we covered quite a bit. What else are you
No,
curious
I
about?
mean, so basically we have been speaking about this intuitive eating, and when it comes to this, also, do you think that it applies to, like, because there are differences, general population and athletic population. So as were speaking with Matt Fitzgerald, uh, basically when he
Hmm.
was writing this book Endurance Diet, and he was interviewing and observing elite endurance athletes, he mentioned that, well, basically they are not counting their calories, they are just eating intuitively, let's call it, and it's been working perfectly for them. So I mean, it's certainly something that anybody can develop. But
Yeah, it's true. A lot of the principles remain the same between the people I work with that are just general population uh, versus amateur athletes
mhm,
versus professional athletes, because I do work with people at all different levels. I have several people that are Olympic athletes that are training twice a day,
uh-huh,
7 days a week or 6 days a week, depending on the time of the season. So people of all different activity levels can learn to use their body cues, because your body is going to adjust its hunger based on your
yeah,
caloric output. So if we tell somebody to, if we practice identifying physical hunger and eating in accordance with that, somebody that's less active is going to naturally take in fewer calories than somebody who is highly active. Furthermore, it's such a valuable skill to have, to be able to adjust your own intake for when your own activity goes down or up. Because none of us do the same thing every week, year round. Sometimes we get sick, sometimes we get injured. I mentioned that I have back problems, and I was terrified that when I went from running a lot to not running at all, that I was going to get fat. I was
yeah,
like, oh, here it comes, here it comes. Some fears never die. Um, and I just said, Georgie, you know how to do this. You've told thousands of people how to do this. You can do this. And I just had to listen to my appetite and observe and respond to my body as it asked for less food. And it's true. Like, we all tend to notice when our appetite goes up and we think, my God, I'm so hungry. What's going on here? But then we don't appreciate that what is also happening is that our appetite comes back down at other times. And if we don't follow its lead in that direction,
mhm,
clearly we can gain weight if you're always following it when your appetite's up, but then you're eating just as much when your appetite's down.
yeah. And I think that when it comes to, like, specifically athletes, it's kind of there are athletes who are, like, very analytical, and basically
Hmm.
this gets in the way of trusting their body, and this is typically among endurance athletes, I found. So
It's true.
basically,
It's true. Yeah, they tend to be
for
a pretty
example,
driven
I
bunch.
observed it also on myself. Like, I had a big training, for example, long run, and I don't feel hungry afterwards or whatever. But analytically, I'm thinking, like, okay, but I should uh, eat more because I had this big training volume or whatever. But as I've been actually experimenting recently, like you said, maybe I don't have that hunger, but it kicks in the next day. So the next day I would eat much more. And I would do better if I listen to my body and eat the next day than on the day of the long run, because I just stuff myself. I have less time in the day because I had the long run.
Sure. Yeah, it evens out in the big picture, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's a good idea to have something after activity. Like, we know that
Hmm.
recovery is best if you can begin rehydrating and getting some carbohydrates,
Yes.
soon after activity. But you're not going to fill in all of the calories that you burned on a 2 or 3 hour run,
Yeah, and that's what I
right
was
away.
trying to do,
So
actually.
the question of, yes, right, I'm going to make up for all of it right now. Um, if you just give your body time and you respond to its cues, it fills in that gap over the following 12, 24, 48 hours. So some people will, and it can be different each day or each week. People's hunger tends to return sooner if they were swimming and longer if they were running. Some of that has to do with the impact, right? So when you're running, your digestive system is taking like boom, 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 shake, shake, shake the whole time. So that's a little irritating. Plus, the rise in body temperature will dull your appetite. So if you're running and it's a super hot, sweaty summer day, you may not feel very hungry afterwards. I'll recommend get some fluid, get some carbohydrates in, but it may be more of a delay where your appetite doesn't really rise to meet all of your needs within the first few hours. It might take the rest of the day or the following day. Whereas after a swim, your body temperature did not go as high and your digestive system is not being punched quite so much. So people tend to get out of the pool and be like, "Rawr, give me food." So imagine a triathlete being totally confused by why after some workouts they feel such an increase and some workouts they don't. But if you just let your body, if you follow its lead, it does a very nice job of taking care of you and making sure that you replace enough.
For me, perfectly. Yes, it's basically the message: listen or believe your body, believe in your body.
Yeah. And there's not really a wrong way to do it. Like if you eat more right after the run and then less at dinner or less the following day comparatively, or you have less immediately after, maybe have a sore throat or your stomach's upset, then the next day your appetite will be higher to match it. I don't think there's too much advantage to micromanaging it and trying to be too analytical.
There is the control.
Right? Yeah, we all want to control something because it gives the illusion of benefit.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay. Yeah?
Well, I think... Sorry, I was just going to say there's some added detail that I do find is helpful, which is really just to, if an athlete needs something to analyze or something to focus on, I do recommend for endurance athletes to try and make sure that they're prioritizing carbohydrate intake and not going too high on fats or proteins or processed foods, kind of junk foods like cake and soda. So in terms of food choice, I do find that can be a helpful thing, but it doesn't have to get so analytical where you weigh and measure everything. You can really eat pretty freely.
Yeah, that sounds great. And why do you recommend athletes to eat carbohydrates? Come on, carbohydrates make you fat.
Right, yeah. It's, well, carbohydrates are a great source of energy. And if people it is easy to overeat carbohydrates, especially for people that are lower activity levels. They taste so good. Everybody likes them. And they're not highly satiating. So, in other words, it's easier to get an excess of calories from carbohydrates. They don't make you feel heavy or full as much as if you were trying to overeat proteins and fats.
Smart carbs or these slower sources of carbs, they are pretty satiating as well, right?
It's true. Like high fiber ones, like if you're eating, barley and brown rice and oatmeal and whole wheat bread, it's more satisfying. Sugars, on the other hand, are very low satisfaction. So, you could eat gummy bears all day long and probably feel quite okay with it. Athletes need a high amount of carbohydrates because they burn so much carbohydrates during their training and their activity. And it's absolutely possible to stay active if you don't have enough carbohydrates. And so there's an illusion. A lot of people think they're just fine if they eat, 3 or 4 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram or even less. Say a moderate carb diet, not really a low carb diet. But then they don't necessarily recognize how much better they could be doing, how much more volume they could recover from. And that could be an advantage they're leaving to somebody else who eats more carbs and therefore can train at higher intensities and higher qualities, higher mileage, and just get better and more training in. So you might be doing okay on not that much carbs, but many people find that when they actually focus a bit more on carbohydrates, that it improves things to a level they didn't know that they had. So I think that's helpful. It's also important and not often discussed that the impact on the immune system that
Thank
carbohydrates
you.
have.
That's what I wanted to add.
Oh, good, good. So when you do endurance training, naturally it's part of the process of your body adapting to the exercise that it releases stress hormones during the course of exercise. And so these stress hormones are not bad. They perform really vital functions for your body. But one thing that does happen is that hormones like cortisol, they decrease the strength of your immune system for a period of hours. So after you do a long, exhaustive run, especially at like a race pace effort, you have a bit of a vulnerable window in terms of you're more likely to have a virus or a bacterium get through your defenses and make you ill. And we know that we don't want that because not only does it suck, it means lost training time, lost recovery time. So if you take in carbohydrates, you actually can close that window earlier. It suppresses the cortisol and that relieves the dampening on your immune system. So you can give your immune system a bit better support by making sure that you take in carbohydrates during and after long runs. Is that consistent with what you've heard?
Definitely. And I mean, many athletes come to injuries because, they have suppressed immune system. Oh, well, not injuries, but also injuries from the tiredness in general. But from the suppressed immune system, they get cold, they get some viruses or whatever, and there is definitely also this connection between gut and the rest of the body.
Yeah. So getting carbohydrates is really helpful in not getting sick so much during the, especially during the winter months. So that's a helpful thing too. It also helps with your sleep. People who don't consume enough carbohydrates tend to wake up a lot in the evening. Especially in like the pre-dawn hours, like 2-3 in the morning, wake up and you feel somewhat agitated and shaky and way too energetic for it to be the middle of the night. And that's a really reliable sign that somebody might benefit from adding some more carbohydrates into their diet, get a more restful sleep, and that helps with your hormone levels as well as recovery and everything. So there's really no sizable advantage to be gained from underfeeding yourself carbohydrates. The people that you see standing on podiums, by and large, have all been eating high carbohydrate diets. It's just people that are, there's an exception here or there that's mildly successful on a low carb diet, and they try and cash in and talk about it all the time. But there's a lot of athletes on couches. Because of their low carb diets. There's a lot of athletes that are at the back of the pack thanks to their low carb diets. It's definitely not a glamorous way to athletic success, I have to say.
Yeah, I really love how Matt actually put it when it comes to low carb diets in context of endurance training. And he said that even if you can perform very well on that, you just found a harder way how to do it.
It's so true. Yeah, there's no points for suffering.
I really love that. It's so true. I mean, yes, there are people who are really gravitate towards a lower carb diet or love it for whatever reason. Usually it comes from their beliefs and typically from misinformation, not understanding biology very well. But I mean, the more I study, the more I understand biology. There is, from my perspective, really no real performance benefit from low carbohydrates diet. There is none.
I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah. So we covered this topic, and I would like to also ask you, what are the behavioral changes, or, some of the habits for people to stay lean? And let's say all year round, because we already know, let's say, we should eat more carbohydrates. We know that we should eat smart carbohydrates, have protein, or anybody can Google what's the good protein ratio and so on. But putting it into practice is a different thing.
Sure. So the general overview that we talked about so far was waiting until you're hungry, eating until you're satisfied and including all different things on your plate. And then for athletes, more than non-athletes, it is important to prioritize complex carbohydrates. So something that we didn't talk about yet is the fun stuff like treats, like chocolate and beer and cookies, because
Let's get into it.
we know that we don't. Let's get into the fun stuff. So what I recommend is, I don't even know how to describe my approach. I guess my approach is awareness and kindness and gentleness. And so I'm the last person that says, just never eat treats again. Get over it. I think too many people, they try and treat themselves that way. So I get clients and they say, I can't eat the bad food. I better not have that. I can't buy it. I don't have it in the house. I tell people to keep that away from me. And they treat cookies like they're like little evil monsters, and it's just a food. It's a food that's best to have in smaller quantities and less frequently than every meal every day. But it's really not a moral failing to want to eat something that's less nutritious. So what I usually do with my clients is we start by observing. And that can be a challenge in itself, to write down the foods that you have that are what I call low nutrition foods. So what I include there would be things like desserts, so candy or ice cream, gelato, cake, as well as drinks with calories. So that could be alcohol, such as wine or beer. It could also be hard cider. It could be soda. It could be juice or lemonade or iced tea. Basically any sugary or alcoholic drinks. Another category would be fried foods. So deep fried foods, we know, are not among the highest nutrition. And we know they have some health properties that I guess they have some things in them that we would want to keep reduced. So they may have trans fat. They have compounds that can lead to cancer and atherosclerosis. So fried foods we try and keep an eye on. And that would include potato chips, fried chicken, tortilla chips, that sort of thing. So once we've got all of these categories, I provide people, in the book there's a chart, and so you can keep a tally of, like, Monday I had one dessert and one drink, and Tuesday I had 2 fried foods. And so just observing this for a week can be very eye-opening. It may be one of those categories where people didn't have a complete and accurate view of their intake. Sometimes people say, I hardly eat any of this stuff. And at the end of the week, they're like, wow, a little here and a little there adds up. I give the example in the book, somebody that added sugar to her tea or her coffee. And because she drank so much coffee and tea, when she actually totaled up how much she was having, it was a very considerable amount. And she hadn't thought that it made much difference. So once we have an idea of the baseline, that gives us a place to begin. So my approach is beginning with somebody where they are, rather than trying to describe some ideal and go for that immediately. So we start where somebody is, and then we just start improving. So in the terms of treats, all we try and do is decrease the total amount. I don't have an end goal for people. Like, it doesn't say you may have 3 treats a week. That's not a proclamation. That's up to me to make. I invite people to experiment with reducing it gradually over time, and I give them tools to do so. So does that make sense? First of all, kind of start where people are at and then just gradually reduce.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. It's not such a shock to the system to have to give up everything at once. So usually one of the first things that we do is we talk about what's truly worth it and what's not. Because as you know, like, there's a cookie is not a cookie. There are amazing cookies and there are crappy cookies. But if they all have calories and fat and sugars that we want to limit our intake of, we might as well not eat the ones that don't taste very good. Yeah. So a lot of times people, the first change that they try and make with regard to their treats is to eat the most worth it ones or the most delicious ones and pass on stuff that's just medium. So for me personally, Oatmeal raisin cookies are not that great. I like chocolate chip cookies. So if I'm out with my husband and we're getting a coffee and he gets a chocolate chip cookie and he says, "Do you want a bite?" I say, "Yes." "Do you want a bite of my oatmeal raisin cookie?" No thanks. I mean, it's okay. It's okay, but like that's a very easy way to create a standard for yourself to only eat your favorite things and not just the things that are okay because they're there.
Yeah. And I think there is also a different level to that, because something that you like more, it's harder to say no to. And this creates, you need to use more willpower, more energy to say no to these things.
Right. So why not use that in the easier places, right? Like skip the stuff that's not that amazing. It's the easy stuff to skip.
Yeah.
So once we do that, then people can often see that their baseline has changed somewhat. So if they had, I'm just going to pick a number, 25 treats the first week, maybe just passing on things that are not amazing brings them down to 20. And that could be enough for them to be seeing weight loss. Maybe they start to see their weight is moving down. And then it's really up to the person if they want to continue to try fewer treats and see if that accelerates their weight loss, or if they're happy saying like, wait, if my weight's coming down, maybe I just stay here, I keep doing this and see how far it comes down. Maybe I get to a body I'm totally happy with and I keep eating 20 treats a week and that's fine. There's no rule. It's very much, I think each person's life is up to them and they should do what they want. So if somebody decides, I'm not losing as much weight as I want to try and pursue more progress, then we might look at some other treat reduction strategies. So another one that I often share with people is the idea of changing the frequency or the portion size instead of trying to change both at the same time. So if you look at one particular food, let's say somebody has ice cream in their freezer and every night they make a bowl of ice cream. So there's two ways that we could approach that. We could change the frequency and say, okay, I'm going to have the ice cream every other night instead of every night and just keep everything else the same. That would reduce the amount of ice cream by half. Or we could say, I really like having it every single night. I'm just going to have a smaller bowl of ice cream. And so we could reduce the portion by 50% or 30%, doesn't matter, but without having to change the frequency. And so thinking about changing one but not the other gives you an idea of being able to personalize and think about what is more important for you. Because some people, I personally would have very small treats on a very frequent basis. That makes me very happy. Yeah. I love having a square or two of chocolate, but I have it every single day. Mm-hmm. My husband, on the other hand, he would rather have a bowl of ice cream or a piece of cake, but very infrequently, like once a week or less, out at a restaurant, order something and have, more of a unique experience. So neither of those is right or wrong, and they both can lead to healthy bodies.
Yeah, that's perfect.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's like a different stroke for different folks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to match somebody else's way. Whatever works for you, you're decreasing the total amount of calories that you're getting from these low nutrition foods. That's what leads to weight loss. So that's a pretty important piece for a lot of people to practice, just observing their treats and paying attention to them, and then modifying it in a way that doesn't feel like punishment or restriction, but feels like just choosing in line with what you want for yourself long term. Because I think that's important to keep the motivation so that you actually do this for a long time, as opposed to something that you do for 2 weeks and then put on the bookshelf.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you think also, it reminded me, like, for example, some athletes or people in general want to stay lean year round. They have this idea of, let's say, for men, I want to stay at or below 10% body fat all year round, or for endurance cyclists, they don't want to gain too much weight, during the winter time. Is it okay for them, or to which extent it's okay to them to maybe gain weight during the winter or lose weight and so on?
It's recommended to try and not have very large swings up and down. It's realistic to have a. I'm hesitant to put numbers on here
A
because
considerable
people
amount of body fat, let's say below 15% for men.
Well, I don't think it's great for training to be losing a large amount of weight, right at the beginning of the season. So, as we said, it opens up your immune system. You're more likely to get sick if you're in a large calorie deficit. So I would like to see people stay relatively stable body weights and body fat percentages throughout the year. So I would say, I'm thinking as like a percent of total body weight, like I would 5% fluctuation.
Okay.
So for most people, that will be like, assuming an athlete is between 100 and 200 pounds, that would be 5 to 10 pounds or 2.5 to 5 kilos as a range. I don't think somebody should be gaining or losing 10 kilos between the off season and competitive season. I just don't think it's healthy. And I think rapid weight shifts, you're more likely to be gaining and losing fat. When you probably be better off just staying at a more consistent weight and supporting the retention of your muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And like when it comes to just generally body fat percentage, like these fluctuations over the years compound, and it seems like people who have these fluctuations, like people who go on a diet, so they lose weight, then they yo-yo diet back, so basically they gain weight again and so on. Over the long periods of time, they develop more body fat. So this also applies to athletes, like, let's say, they are lean during the season. In the off season, they get 5-6 kilo or more. And yeah, over time, they finish with their career or lower their intensity, lower their training volume. And suddenly they start, getting all this weight back. And well, that goes all hand in hand with what we have been talking about, also like eating intuitively, listening to our bodies according to our intensity and activity levels and so on.
Right, because if you follow your body's signals, it would be very surprising that anybody who's following their body signals usually doesn't go through drastic weight swings. It leads to, relative stability.
Yeah.
So
that's perfect.
Anything else that you have written down in terms of questions or stuff that you're dying to know?
Yeah, just a few more, because as I mentioned, I want to appreciate your time and want to be considerate about it. And that's like, actually, what's your favorite food or what's your favorite cuisine?
What was the second one? Oh, favorite cuisine.
Yes.
I love Italian food. I absolutely love Italian food. So I did actually spend a month in Rome in 2017, and it was just the most wonderful thing in the world. And I love going to the markets and speaking terrible Italian with the people at the markets and getting fresh produce. And I love tomatoes and basil and cheese and bread. So that's my favorite cuisine. My favorite food, I do love peanut butter, as I already mentioned. I also am very, very fond of pizza.
Like traditional Italian or more like, let's call it American style, or?
Let's see. When I make pizza, it's not that traditional Italian because I like to put a lot of toppings on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in Italy, they tend to put like 1 or 2 toppings on there, and they're like kind of like primo quality. But I guess I have an American background where I'm like, I want an inch thick of lots and lots of toppings. But I don't like greasy meats. Like I don't like pepperoni or salami all that much. So I like lots of vegetables. So I like artichokes and black olives and red peppers and onions and like lots of plants.
Yeah, like a salad on a pizza.
Pretty much, yes. I want, but cooked. Yeah, I want like a ton of different vegetables on there and lots of tomatoes, and I like the cheese, like mozzarella or feta. I love feta cheese. Feta cheese might be on my top 5 foods. Feta cheese is wonderful stuff. So I like Greek food. I do. I love a good lemony chicken souvlaki. It makes me very, very happy. I love hummus. I love lemon. I love herbs, and I've become more and more of a fan of olive oil over the years. I used to
Okay.
have, I think, back from my eating disorder days, I didn't like anything to have any fat whatsoever. And so peanut butter was like one of my first loves
Uh-huh.
in the fat department. And then I've just come, as you read more and more about nutritional science and you learn about all the health benefits of olive oil and monounsaturated fats, I deliberately fell in love with olive oil. And now I just really adore it. I love, last week I made like a basil olive oil where I have Vitamix,
Mm-hmm.
pretty powerful blender, and I put handfuls and handfuls of basil in it and a 500 milliliter bottle of olive oil and just run it. And I put it on bread, I put it on chicken, and I put it on pasta, and
Drink it.
wonderful stuff. I have not drank it yet, but
Yeah.
because I don't want to go too high on the fat, moderate fat diet. But yeah, I love Italian food and Greek food. I'm not crazy about a lot of Asian cuisine.
Interesting.
Yeah. So a bit about me and my food preferences.
Yeah, but I really love how you like mentioned, for example, Italian food. They place a lot of importance on quality, and like there is a big difference in pizza. Like you mentioned, minimalistic toppings and very high quality, and especially the dough. It's a different world. I mean, the traditional pizza and what we can find even in, let's say, Italian restaurants around the world outside of the Italy. It's usually very
Yeah.
different.
I love the Neapolitan
Oh my!
pizza dough,
Don't get me started on
where
that.
it's like, yeah, where it's charred, but it's crispy and it's lovely. So I like that.
Uh-huh.
I like a thin and a very chewy, I guess like a more New York style pizza. I am not a fan of the Chicago deep
Deep
dish
dish. Oh, so
pizza.
you are like a semi-pro about in pizza, right?
I love food, man.
Yeah.
Food is my life. I did go to Chicago and I took one look at the deep dish pizza and I was like,
It's
oh,
very
I don't know, but
greasy
that's just too
also.
much stuff. Yeah, it's just too much for me. It was not my thing. But even in Italy, you can get like the Sicilian style pizza, which is more on like a
Yeah.
focaccia. It's okay. It's all right.
Mhm.
I ended up buying some, but I brought it back to the apartment and put like more spinach and more tomatoes on it. It was like, I need more toppings if there's, that much crust.
Yeah, but for me personally, nothing compares to Neapolitan. That's like
Yeah,
the best.
it's amazing.
Okay,
It's amazing.
and so what's coming up for you next? Like,
Well, what's coming up for me next?
yeah.
I am working most diligently on this new program that we're doing. So, of course, I coach people one-on-one. And then my company,
Yeah.
One by One Nutrition, we also have online programs. So for
is-
people
is
that want to
there-
join a group.
Is there where people can contact you and find you?
Sure, yeah. The best way to find me is my name, GeorgieFear.com.
Okay.
That's always reliable, and there's, as far as I know, only one Georgie Fear on the planet. So you're pretty sure you'll find the right person if you go to GeorgieFear.com. And that has links to if somebody wants to purchase coaching from me in just a single consult, or they can link to my company and find out about our coaching programs. Most people that work with me participate on a monthly basis, and so they pay a fee for the month, and then we talk on the phone every week, and they have unlimited contact between, so they can send me Facebook messages and emails unlimited and photos of their lunch, and we just, I'm pretty high contact, and so we just do it for a monthly rate. And then we also have online groups. In particular, people can take our courses for free if you go to onebyOnenutrition.com. You have to spell it out, so it's
Yes.
not the digits. It's
I'll put it in the
one.
show notes also, so people can easily
Awesome.
access it, of course.
Yeah. So if you go there, there's, I spent an entire year making this free course of nutrition lessons, and I feel very strongly that everybody, whether they have ability to to pay for help or not should be able to get accurate information. We all have to eat, so we all should be able to know how to do it.
Yeah.
So you can go there and take courses for free, and then if people want extra help, then they can join a Facebook group where we have coaches in the group, and that's pretty low, affordable rate. And then we also have a separate group that is not about weight loss, but for people that struggle with binge eating and really want to kind of gain control over eating in a healthy, normal, relaxed fashion. So we have a coaching program that's dedicated just for that. And so we're going to be enrolling in January people for that. And so that's a 12-week program. And then we have an offer of month to month after that.
Yeah.
So people can continue for as long as they need. But there's lots of information on the website. I don't want to bore everybody talking about it.
Is that like a limited number of participants?
I don't know at this point how many we're going to take. We did a test group of it where we limited the participants to 15. And we did that in the summer. And it worked out fantastically. But I don't think we need to keep it that low. So we'll be able to take more than 15. But I don't know exactly how many participants we'll be able to take. But my goal is to help everybody that wants help. Yeah,
that's perfect. And actually, I think one of my first interactions with your website was the 1x1 nutrition, and it's amazing website. I mean, I think that's one of the best things regarding the nutrition that I have ever seen.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really glad that you recommend it to people. Hopefully other people check it out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for people, there's like online Bible of nutrition, and it's no matter like, I would say, what's your experience level, go check it out.
It's free, right? Like, why not?
Yeah, definitely. You have so much to learn from there. I mean, everybody will for sure find something to learn. So that's it for me. Like, Georgie, thank you very much for your time once again. Thank you for your energy and for smiles. And yeah.
Good. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I look forward to talking again, and I will be sure to send people over to listen to the episode.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and see you next time. If you liked it, please share, subscribe, and you will find all the important links in the show notes or below video, however you got to this. So there will be also a page to subscribe, my Facebook page, my website, and if you are looking for a coach, for coaching experience, you are looking to boost your performance, whether it's mental or physical, to the next level, then go to my website that is linked down below and contact me through there.